We're living through a climate crisis, and one of the most significant impacts of this crisis is the presence of more frequent and intense disasters across the country, whether that be floods, bushfires or heat waves. I'm here on the south coast of New South Wales in the midst of forest that's been ravaged by bushfires in the last month, and we're in for a long summer, one in which we will see many more of these bushfires, not just here in New South Wales but around the country. Children are uniquely vulnerable and highly exposed to these impacts of climate change. The impacts are significant, whether they be health related from the inhalation of bushfire smog, whether they be the anxiety caused by repeated disruptions to daily lives from bushfire warnings or flood warnings, whether they be disrupted education from the damage caused by floods or bushfires. Children are at the forefront of the climate crisis.
I woke up one morning at around 6 o'clock and Mum and Dad told me that there was a fire.
There was 400 homes lost, thousands of outbuildings, lots and lots of stock, huge amounts of wildlife impacted. I think that was our first experience as a family of being involved in a major disaster. The initial decision was for me to stay here and defend the property, and for the family to be able to pack up and go.
Very anxious and worried about Dad because he wasn't there with us. I was very anxious in general, just if the fire got into Burmie and hurt anyone or got rid of our house.
One of the hardest impacts has been seeing the impact on the kids and seeing how they have reacted to the process. When this new fire that was directly visible from where we are right now, we could see it just on the horizon. Ed was a bit upset about that. He was 3 years younger back in 2019, 2020, and to see where that emotional state and that emotional imprinting at that time had happened and how he could reconcile that with being 3 years older.
The Wardell community is based right here next to a very large river system. That river system is dynamic and ever-changing, but those changes seem to be happening at a faster rate as we go forward. We normally do get really heavy rainfall in the monsoon time. When the floods came, it was something else. It was torrential rain, and we knew that something was up when the normal places that flooded much earlier than they normally flood. And then suddenly areas that had never flooded before were flooding. There was a lot of changes for the children. They missed out on class time obviously during the floods and post-flood. For the children, they lose sleep now when it rains heavily. There's still that element of fear. If it rains for more than a day, there's that worry and that concern at the back of your head that something similar to what happened at the time of the floods would happen again. We are, however, living in fear of the new fire season that's beginning now. We are taking all the precautions we can to protect ourselves from the potential that fire is going to be our next big issue in the near future.
3 years ago, UNICEF partnered with Royal Fire West to address the significant impacts of the Black Summer fires on children across the East Coast. Then in 2022, northern New South Wales and southeast Queensland were ravaged by floods, and again children faced significant impacts. And yet again, UNICEF and Royal Fire West were there to respond.
Climate change is here, and climate change is changing childhood. UNICEF Australia and Royal Fire West have combined in a powerful partnership to ensure children and young people's needs are central to the way we're responding to these threats. Together, we're working to make sure children are at the centre of the way our governments are planning and responding to the threat of climate change, the way that they're preparing for natural disaster events, the support that they're providing to children and their families in the immediate moments of being affected by these disasters, and the plans that need to be in place to ensure the recovery support is clear, accessible and sustainable.
Our team and the UNICEF team went out on the road and actually spoke to families and did a lot of work around understanding where the greatest need was and where we should devote our services. And from there, we actually developed what's now known as the Community Recovery Program. How we work is with a multidisciplinary team that's made up of social workers, clinical psychologists, speech pathologists, occupational therapists, and they're supported by the team back here at Royal Far West Centre for Country Kids. No other service is offering the level of breadth but also depth of services, not only to children but all of the key adults around the children. So that will be their parents or caregivers, it will be their teacher, and in fact the whole school community, as well as even people in the local community that have also been impacted by this community-wide trauma.
We've really had two big fires that have had an impact on the preschool and the community, and they've been really big, quite traumatic events. We had children whose families had lost their homes. Royal Far West did some work with the children about emotions and feelings, bringing lots of great resources. I think what was fantastic about Royal Far West is the stuff that we were already doing in our program around teaching children about emotional resilience and well-being and how to be kind and how to deal with big feelings when you feel frustrated or coping with disappointment.
We provide wraparound service to a child, a family, a school and a community. How that looks is very different depending on the school and the community. So for children, they can access direct therapy, so that might mean that they access a psychologist to support with some counselling to process the experience they've gone through and make sense of the change and learn how to deal with the change and the emotions that they're experiencing. The child can also access children's groups. In these groups is a space to really understand that change is part of life, but how do we cope with these changes as they're coming up, and also support children to connect with each other.
Royal Far West was starting programs in the local schools, but we actually went out and contacted Royal Far West directly and asked them for support with Ed in some sort of manner, and they were absolutely fantastic, and I think it only took a couple of weeks and we had regular Wednesday afternoon sessions for an hour with Ed just online.
To deal with my anxiety, we did a couple of different techniques to calm myself down, like breathing and doing an exercise or something, just to calm me down a bit. That helps. It helped a lot.
I feel like the team's been amazing in providing psychological support for the children, the parents, the teachers, everyone who's been affected. It's been outstanding.
This is a great example, this partnership between Royal Far West and UNICEF Australia, of when two NGOs work together and bring their shared strengths together. It just creates wonderful outcomes, and we could not have gotten this program off the ground without their support, without their knowledge and experience in disaster impacted communities. And now as we advocate together for continued change, it's really an exciting partnership that I hope stays in place for a long time to come.
It's really important that we recognise the role children and young people play as agents of change. Children and young people are much more than just passive members of this population for whom things happen to them. Children and young people have, through their own lived experience, a very profound understanding of what they and their peers prioritise when these events happen. We need to put a focus on building children's resilience to climate change, and children and young people can't do that alone.